Ahoy, folks! Welcome to the Jay Saki Show. It's the place you want to go. So I recently just watched Robin Hood and His Merry Men. Disney's Robin Hood and His Merry Men, 1952. This was the second live-action Disney movie ever made after Treasure Island from 1950. Or was that 1951? I don't remember. One of those. But yeah, before, Disney, anytime they made a live-action movie, it had to have some kind of like cartoon segments segued into. But Disney's Treasure Island was the very first live-action movie, and it was followed up by Robin Hood and His Merry Men, their second live-action movie. I don't think I'd watched this movie all the way through since like the year 2000 or 2001, maybe the 90s. This is another one where, growing up in Allentown, Pennsylvania, my sisters would put on all kinds of movies. We would watch the Errol Flynn Robin Hood and this Robin Hood, amongst many other old films. I don't know about most people, but I know in my house, in terms of live-action Robin Hoods, I think we mostly compared the Errol Flynn Robin Hood alongside the Disney Robin Hood. They both have a very similar tone, I guess. They're both old, both grainy. I seem to remember the Disney Robin Hood and His Merry Men being better than the Errol Flynn Robin Hood, but I would have to go back and rewatch the Errol Flynn Robin Hood to get a proper assessment. But to my memory, I know I've seen the Errol Flynn Robin Hood more recently. I think I watched that one in like 2007 in history class in high school, somehow. Whenever I think of the Errol Flynn Robin Hood, I just think of the scene where Robin Hood and His Merry Men are eating food, eating like turkey and venison. And Maid Marian is like, "Oh, I look down on your band of rebels," and Errol Flynn is like, "Oh, well, let me show you why we do what we do." And he takes her over to this place where all the poor starving peasants are. And he's like, "See all these people here? These are the people we swear to protect." And you're thinking, "Oh, wow. Why don't you invite them over to your big, luxurious feast of venison and turkey and pig? Why are they starving in one part of the woods, and a short ways away, you're feasting like a king?" I'm not sure if this makes Robin Hood the world's worst capitalist or the world's worst communist. Take your pick. I don't know. But to my memory, having just rewatched Disney's Robin Hood and His Merry Men, 1952, not to be confused. I keep calling it Disney's Robin Hood, and I know when I say that, people usually think the cartoon animated movie. Not that one. 1952 live action. But yeah, I think this one's probably better than the Errol Flynn one. Probably. But that being said, I don't really think any Robin Hood movies is very good. I think the trouble with Robin Hood movies, or any movie that's based on some public domain story, is the filmmakers go into it assuming that you kind of know the story, so they don't take time to really write out the characters or consider, character arcs, the kind of, things that are fine-tuned today in cinema. Not to say they couldn't do it back then also, but especially whenever it comes to public domain stories. Oh, we're going to make another movie about Hercules or something. Like, they don't take time to do their writing. So, like in Robin Hood and His Merry Men, they offhandedly just mention names of famous figures from Robin Hood lore, like Will Scarlet and Stuteley. And then they, I guess, it's like they're just randomly named in the background. Like, yeah, I know those names. I know those names from the PC game from like 2002 or something like that. The PC game from 2002 is the best version of Robin Hood, hands down. And yeah, they have a little bit more with Little John and Friar Tuck, because you can't forget them, but they're just kind of going through the steps to get them in the story. If anything, did this movie bring you back to your childhood, Jay Saki? Yeah, it did. It did. Seeing Robin Hood and his men run through the woods, it made me think of when I was a kid running through the woods, playing games. It brought me back to a more innocent time. It's hard for me to think of anything like specifically nice to say about this movie, other than it's one of those things where maybe it's a piece of your childhood, maybe not. Is there anything to really remember this movie by? Somebody gets crushed in a drawbridge as it's being hired. Oh, that's edgy. Older movies like this are so in their own world, it really is hard to critique them. But I'm doing the best I can. This really is one of those things where you just might watch it and you might say, well, that's kind of fun, but really, it really is just an old movie, an old example of Disney trying to figure out its footing before it would eventually get on to bigger and better things like Mary Poppins. I find, if anything, while watching these kinds of movies, I find myself pausing it to rewind to see how they did certain special effects. Like, somebody will get stuck with an arrow, and I'm thinking did somebody actually shoot an arrow into a padded board or something underneath the person's tunic? How did they do that? How did they get the arrow to fly across the screen and land on that guy's back? So you pause and rewind and see if you can spot the trick. I think, honestly, movies like this are not worth doing elongated reviews of. But, at the end of the day, no matter how average or middle of the road some of these older movies are, I say, it's still always educational. It is always educational to go back and revisit these movies and watch them carefully, and you'll learn something. You'll learn something about how people thought and how people acted back in the day. You'll learn something about the year 1952 when they made Robin Hood and his Merry Men. Have a good night, everyone.